Thank you. So thank you all for coming, and everybody on YouTube, thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Something you'd like to talk about on the sutras that we've been discussing? Okay, well then we'll continue with our recitation and our discussions. So I believe that where we left off last time was at 26.97. We finished that, and tonight we started .98. So we've been seeing that the thus gone one, the victorious one, has been teaching on the Four Noble Truths and on the 12 links and so on, and his disciples have recognized the meaning of the three jewels, the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha. So this is where we are now. So the short recitation here from 98 down to the end of 101. So Kunga, would you read those few and then we'll stop and then we'll have a short discussion before we go on to the next group.
Sure. Immediately the thus gone one's unbounded voice went out into the 10 directions. Its sweet and beautiful sound could be heard throughout the heavens. The sage of the Sakyas, endowed with the 10 powers, went to the hill of the fallen sages, at Varanasi, where he turned the one and only supreme wheel of Dharma. Hundreds of Buddhas residing in the 10 directions all became silent. All their attendants then asked the victorious ones, "When we heard this voice, your teaching of Dharma by means of your 10 powers fell silent. Why did you become silent? Please tell us right away." They replied, "In the past, for hundreds of lives, this Buddha strove diligently towards awakening, and outshone as he did so many hundreds of thousands of bodhisattvas. Thus did the benefactor become so thoroughly trained and attain the most auspicious awakening. And it is because he has turned the Dharma wheel that revolves 3 times that we are silent." When the 100 million beings heard this answer from the Buddhas, they developed the power of love and entered supreme and auspicious awakening. Then they said, "Even we are able to follow in the footsteps of this sage, with all his glorious diligence and power. Now may we swiftly become the best in this world. May we give to others the eye of Dharma."
Okay, thank you. Would anybody have any comments on this section here? It's a short section, but it's important. Anybody have any comment about it?
It was going a little bit fast, so I find myself I have to reread to absorb.
Okay, do you have your text with you?
Yes.
Okay, well, good. Well, I think, the meaning here is that all these beings heard the words of the thus gone one, and heard the support words of all the Buddhas and so on. And at 101, 26.101, it says, they developed the power of love and entered supreme and auspicious awakening. And they said, even we are able to follow in the footsteps of this sage with all his glorious diligence and power. So to me, what this means was the realization that all these teachings, the teachings of the Buddha, what he has brought everyone is capable to be able to recognize this within themselves. It's the Buddha nature within all beings. In other words, what they're realizing. And the silence was their, kind of absorbing that, becoming one with that realization of that. And then it says, the last line here on 101, it says, "May we swiftly become the best in this world, and may we give to others the eye of Dharma." So this is, becoming one with that Buddha nature. That may we realize all the awakened that can see and everything, and that may we be doing this for the benefit of others. So the essence of what the meaning of what it is to be Buddha here, I think, is being declared by these beings who are listening, who are partaking in this. Does this make any sense? Does anybody have any comment about this? That there is this realization that this is available to them. So for us too, of course. Yes, Alex.
I'm trying to kind of picture how this is all happening and like why this happening. So I guess when the Buddha becomes silent, I guess that was kind of an invitation for the beings to say something, and like to digest whatever he taught, and then to reply with something. So I guess they take this opportunity to say that we able to follow in the footsteps, and report on a
Yeah, there was nothing else to say at that point.
Yeah, how they absorb it, how they develop the appreciation for the Dharma.
Bro, do you think that's what's happening? Does anybody else have a comment about this? Do you think they just became they became at peace with what has been taught thus far? That there was a realization, there was a recognition, and there was nothing left to have to say at that point.
Could you explain the wheel of Dharma that revolves 3 times?
We're going to get into that soon. That comes up next.
Okay.
That's going to come up next in this next part of the recitation. So here, the main part that I thought was important about this brief section was that there's a recognition, a realization that this is something that we all have within us. That this Buddha nature is something that is common to us all. Now, the potential is there, but it has to be realized by each and every person by their own selves and so on. So it's the bodhisattvas who are asking this question and who are coming to this realization that that's what's happening. So this is significant in saying, look, what the Buddha has been talking about, what the victorious one has been talking about, is possible for us all. Okay. All right. Well, then, if we can move on, I'd like to do the next recitation, and you'll see, and so it's a couple of pages. So this will go to the end of 26.114. So I'm going to read this. I'm going to read it slowly and deliberately, and there'll probably be a few times where I stop and ask, for a little bit of discussion. So, but this is the description of the wheel. What is the wheel? What is the significance of the wheel of Dharma? So it starts at 102. At that point, the Bodhisattva, the great being Maitreya, said to the Blessed One, Lord, these Bodhisattvas, the great beings who reside in the 10 directions of the world, would like to hear from you in person in order to learn how you turn the wheel of Dharma. Therefore, Lord, please be kind enough to explain what kind of wheel is the wheel of Dharma, which has been turned by the thus gone one, the worthy one, the perfect Buddha. The Blessed One replied, Maitreya, the wheel of the Dharma is profound because it cannot be grasped by the intellect. This wheel is hard to see because it is beyond duality. This wheel is hard to comprehend because it is not an object of conceptual investigation. This wheel is hard to discern because it is related to the sameness of wisdom and consciousness. So the profundity of this, I'm saying this now, not the text, the profundity of this is so profound. This wheel is to our rational mind, our logical mind, is very abstract, and it has to be experienced. To recognize this feature of this circular, this wheel, this idea of a birthlessness and a deathlessness. There's this constant state of flux, if you will, of time. Time hasn't been discussed here, but it encompasses all of that in such a way so that to try and rationalize it, you just fall on your face. What I just said was just was just my view of it, but everybody here could have their own personal view about it if you've had the experience of witnessing it, being realizing it, and we've all been there. It's just a question of being able to recall that and be able to have some kind of way of explaining it and so on, to be stable in it, to be able to articulate the experience.
Mm-hmm.
Any comments? Okay. So then it continues on 104. I'm sorry, somebody said something?
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry. I was just going to say it makes me think of on like a personal practice level when kind of doing some of these practices, trying to get a glimpse of the nature of mind, where at least for me, and I think for a lot of other people, I would imagine as well, trying to see or experience something that can't be an object of consciousness or an object of the attention is very difficult, even if the thing itself is kind of obvious or all pervasive or something like that, because we're so used to, like we're talking about with the intellect. It made me think of that on a personal level, where it can be profound and hard to be grasped by the intellect. To point to something to people, particularly if they're not ready to hear it, that can't be an object of their intellect, can be kind of a difficult thing or something. So it was making me think of that.
Do you think that, to use the expression, the phrase that it's heartfelt has relevance here?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It's yeah, because heartfelt to me has the connotation of something that isn't necessarily conceptual. And I think that I know Garchen Rinpoche talks a lot about, even on a more literal level to what you're saying, the heartfelt of where that needing to like melt that the ice block of one's selfishness or self-grasping through compassion is like the kind of like the most profound way to actually have better meditations. So it's making me think of that with the heartfelt in a more literal sense. But yeah, I think so. It's like a different kind of knowledge or a different kind of way of knowing than what we're conditioned to do. And I think that heartfelt kind of speaks to that.
Yes. Anybody else like to comment on that? Okay. So then it goes on to talk about the qualities of the wheel. So we're at dot 104. This wheel is without any blemishes because it leads to the attainment of liberation. which is free from any obscurations. This wheel is subtle because it cannot be exemplified. This wheel is essential because it leads to the attainment of Vajra-like wisdom. This wheel is indestructible because it pre-exists in its own turning. So what do you think about the point that says the attainment of Vajra-like wisdom? What does the Vajra-like wisdom mean to you? Bernie, maybe you can begin that conversation. What does Vajra-like wisdom mean
Like
to
wisdom, well, Vaj, yeah, generally there's various words that are used to describe wisdom. Vajra generally means, in this context, I think something like a diamond, something which is so hard it can cut everything else, but nothing else can cut it, meaning that this wisdom cuts through all conceptual views and no conceptual view can defeat it, or contradict it. So it's really the fact that very penetrating, it just cuts through all sort of intellectual views and intellectual conceptualizations and intellectual confusion. That's how I understand Vajra likes wisdom, and that's going with the title of the Diamond Cutter Sutra, which is one of the two famous Mahayana sutras short sutras on emptiness, the perfection of wisdom.
Does anybody else have a comment? What does Vajra-like mean to you? Yes, Alex.
Well, oftentimes we associate Vajra with, like it was said, indestructible. So something you cannot break. And with regard to wisdom, I think there is certain kind of realization we have that cannot be undone. Like, for example, when we little children, we look at the mirror and we're not sure who is there appearing in the mirror. But once we realize, well, that's our own reflection appearing in the mirror, that confusion is gone. We can never be confused about whoever that we see in the mirror that's moving around. So in that way, we I guess when we realize something that is really like profound, deep truth, we can no longer forget it. I mean, no matter no matter how old we get or whatever, like, I mean, when we get older, we may forget certain facts, even what is our wife's name or whatever. But there are certain things that we never can unlearn, basically. So that's the kind of wisdom I think that's talking about.
Yes, those are qualities of it. Yes, and the Vajra, I think it's a Sanskrit word, and it was used in the Hindu tradition before Siddhartha's time and so on, and there it symbolized, the Vajra symbolized a thunderbolt. Here was this all powerful, spontaneously present, powerful, changing force that once it hit, once you saw it, once you were hit by it or something like that, as you just said, you're forever changed. And so it's all penetrating. So the image of a thunderbolt, and in Tibetan Buddhism, the Vajra is this object here, which comes out of the Hindu and represents the thunderbolt, the lightning and the diamond, the indestructibility of the diamond. It's often called the adamantine, if I'm not pronouncing that right, the adamantine, which means diamond-like, so that it was indestructible. So it was this indestructible force, this thunder force that's of this absolute wisdom that penetrates all things. So it says the wheel is indestructible because it pre-exists its own turning. It pre-exists its own turning, which is, so it's talking about the wheel. So, I mean, that's a very abstract way of trying to explain it. But, you know, it's like it's primordial, you know, and when we look at the cosmos, through the lens of all the different telescopes that we have, the optical, and now we have all these, you know, electronic ones and everything, the presence of these wheels is just, you know, undeniable. You see this everywhere, you know, in the cosmos and so on, with all these photographs and so on. And it just presents, you know, this sense of this, you know, ever-present, never-ending cycle that we are part of, that we recognize as being ordinary human beings in the phenomenal world. We see that its presence is that, but there's an absolute nature to it that is heartfelt. So to me, it's very, very powerful.
Yeah, maybe may I just add that it sounds like they want to well, what is alluded is that it's not some kind of artificial stirring things up, you know, making things go in a circle by some sort of external force. I think when they say that it's predate its own turning, means it's just the natural way things are supposed to evolve. We just have to realize that that is the way, that is things that they come to be that way. We just need to grasp what is how that thing works, and once we know that's the way things are, if we follow this natural way of evolution, we'll get there faster.
So
We'll
is
get
that
to the
another
mind.
way of saying that there is an acceptance that we need to accept, you know, what
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
heartfeltness,
So
if you will, this heartfeltness of this Vajra-like, you know, wisdom, that there's an acceptance that we have to, you know, say, okay, I don't understand it in a complete way, but yet I accept the profundity of this, and I experience it, and through that I can express that in a phenomenal way. But yet, but this is beyond that.
that's, yeah, I think that's an interesting way to look at it. But yes, I think this aspect is, yeah, I guess is here as well.
Okay. Any other comments about that? All right. I mean, do you appreciate the fact that we're going slow with this, because this is so meaningful, so profound, and try and understand this and try and relate to this however we can, and even if we don't grasp it at this point, you know, years down the road, as we continue to practice and study, you know, realization will come to us, you know. But you know, these are seeds that are being planted for us, you know, by the Buddha. This was his gift, and we have the ability to be able to cultivate this for ourselves and in order to help other beings and so on. In the same exact way that Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, the victorious one, did 2,600 years ago. In this way, we're no different than Siddhartha Gautama. So then the 105 now, it says this wheel is without mental elaboration because it is devoid of the sources of conceptual thinking. This wheel is undisturbed because of its infinite steadiness. This wheel encompasses everything because it is equal to the sky. So that's a metaphor as a protection. You know, the sky is often related to as a protection for us. If we didn't have the sky, you know, we'd be burned up by all the radiation and so on like that. And you know, the people, you know, 2,600 years ago had some kind of awareness, you know, that the sky was a protection, that there was this atmosphere or something, you know. Maybe they perceived it, maybe they projected it, but nevertheless, the sky is regarded as a protection.
Well, I have to disagree here when it says equal to the sky. I think what they mean is it's as vast as the sky.
Okay.
Because it's saying encompasses everything, and something which encompasses everything would have to be vast. So it's not the aspect of being a protection, it's the aspect of being vast that they're talking about here.
Well, you make a good point.
As a metaphor.
Yep, that sounds good. Yes, I'm going to make a note here. As a matter of fact, there's a great book if anybody wants to understand bodhicitta a little bit better. There's a book here called Vast as the Heavens, Deep as the Sea. Vast as the heavens, deep as the sea. And this was a collection of four-line poems, if you will, all about bodhicitta by Kunu Rinpoche. And Kunu Rinpoche was the teacher. He was a teacher for the Dalai Lama. He was a teacher for His Holiness Chetsang Rinpoche, for Kenshin Rinpoche. He died in our lifetime. He died in the 80s, I think, or maybe the 60s, but in the 20th century and so on. So very, very profound. And he was so, he taught the jewel ornamental liberation to Kenshin. He transmitted that to Kenshin and to others, I'm sure. But Kenshin has spoken about him. So if you want to really dive into, you know, all these expressions of what bodhicitta is, this book would be great. Called Vast as the Heavens, Deep as the Sea. So vast as the sky is what made me think of that. So then we come to 106. It says Maitreya. Now Maitreya is one of his disciples, or he's a bodhisattva who has not taken human form yet, and he is to be the next Buddha after Siddhartha Gautama or after Shakyamuni Buddha. He's to be the next one and everything. So Maitreya is like a heart son to Shakyamuni Buddha and everything. So he's asking very, very deep questions, very relevant questions, and Siddhartha Gautama is really paying attention to what he says. Shakyamuni Buddha is really paying attention and feeding him the knowledge, the information, the insight into what it is that he himself will become the embodiment of as he becomes totally realized. So Maitreya says, the wheel of Dharma has the nature of the essence of all phenomena. I'll repeat that. This wheel of Dharma has the nature of the essence of all phenomena. It is a wheel with the power to teach. It is a wheel beyond birth cessation, and enduring. It is a wheel without the all ground. It is a wheel of the Dharma way of non-conceptuality to its full extent. So the all ground is in the glossary. It's glossary number 13, if you want to read that. And it's talking about, here it says, it's a wheel of the Dharma way of non-conceptuality to its full extent. So the diluted consciousness is regarded as the substratum. So that's, very abstract words, The diluted consciousness is the substratum of being a realized human being. So we can say that this is where we're caught up in this all ground, and so this wheel is being able to show us the non-conceptually of the full in its full extent. So it's a never-ending wheel. So what that also implies to us is that our experience with it is a never-ending experience. And even if we become realized and have experience with it, it continues to reveal itself in different ways through the activity of working with other people. Because that's part of the sequence. That's part of what happens, is that which is coming in and that which is going out. So it's a never-ending continuum. Then the next line is 107. It says, it is a wheel of emptiness, a wheel of signlessness, a wheel free of any intent. It is a wheel of the unconditioned, a wheel of solitude, a wheel without desire, a wheel of cessation, and a wheel that engages with the enlightened mind of the thus gone ones. So as we approach it, we're going through all these projections and so on, and trying to impute these words, these ideas and so on, what it represents and so on, but it's not fully realized until one has become awakened to the, what we would say, the absolute, to this notion of the wheel. "108 is, it is a wheel that is unconfused regarding the realm of phenomena, a wheel that is undisturbed concerning authentic limit. It is a wheel without attachment and obscuration. It is a wheel free from the two extreme views in the understanding of interdependence. It is a wheel without disturbance within the realm of phenomena, beyond center and edge." As we get into hopefully the next sutra that we talk about, the Samadhi Raja Sutra, the King of Samadhi Sutra, which are the Samadhi Raja Sutra, the state of mind of the enlightened one, of the awakened one, the state of mind. And so this here is giving keywords that are expressed in that samadhi and the teaching of that samadhi, leading us to the experience of that. How do we get to that experience? How do we have that experience? Well, we talk about that through our meditation, through our receiving these teachings, listening to these teachings, to studying these teachings, to contemplating these teachings, to practice these teachings, to contemplate the results that we have from those practices of those teachings, and then the letting go of all the teachings, all the experience, and having the meditative crossing over, the cutting through and the crossing over, where we become the wheel, we become the Dharma, we become what we're talking, we become the nature of all things.
Dorje, what is meant by the two extreme views in the understanding of interdependence?
Well, we talk about the view of nihilism and eternalism, and we talk about the wheel of, or rather, the extremes, the two extremes of individualism and substantialism or materialism. But the thing of nihilism and eternalism, I think, is what's being expressed here, is that there is nothing at all, that we have no reciprocity to any responsibility to anything. Everything we do is meaningless. To the other side, that everything is that there is this everlasting soul, and that everything we do is imprinted on this soul, and we carry this with us. And the middle way is cutting through that. So that's how I take that to. That's how I take the meaning of that. A wheel free from the two extreme views of the understanding of interdependence. The two extreme views of understanding that we break free of the interdependence. The soul implies that we are interdependent, and everything we do is going to have a reaction to it, is going to have an imprint to it, and we're bound to that imprint. And when we can finally cut through that and say, okay, I'm not going to be bound by that. And how do we do that? Is through virtue, is that we become the embodiment of virtue. So that's how I take the meaning of that.
So is it in other words, is it fair to say that one is kind of mechanistic point of view where everything is a result of some prior causes, and we just have to give up, and there is like a fate. Whatever happened in the past will determine what happened in the future. We have no real play in that. And the other saying, hey, I can do whatever I want. There is no real consequences that long lasting, and things just come and appear and disappear, kind of like by random, by coincidence. So there is no true cause and effect. I mean, when we're talking about kind of distant things, not immediate, long, short range, but
yeah. Kunika, what does it mean to you? What do you think about when you hear that?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, what Alex was talking about sounded to me like more like karma, not like interdependence. I don't think of interdependence and karma as being that about the same ideas. I think that karma is about causes and conditions coming together, and interdependence is how things are interrelated to each other and
Well,
dependent
isn't
on
that
each
causes
other.
and conditions?
Yeah.
Isn't karma actually the fiber of interdependence?
Yeah, I guess it could be just a different way of talking about the same thing.
And it's revolutionary. I use that word, but to say or to recognize, to accept, to that the soul is just another concept. Karma is just another concept. These are all man-made creations, fabrications that we allow ourselves to be controlled by. And at some point, they are very, very, very helpful to us. but at some point they can become very, very manipulative, and we can use that, for our own aggrandizement and so on like that. But to get to the essence of the purity means cutting through that, transcending that, and not to be in material form. And if we are in material form, it is with the purity of that, whatever you want to call it, truth or space or however you wish to call that. What is it to be in Buddha nature? What is Buddha nature? So doesn't all of this point, to our recognizing that for ourselves? That was the point I said of receiving the teachings, studying, contemplating, doing the practices, contemplating the results of the practices, and then just resting all of that and being able to whatever word you want to say, to become inseparable with the reality of that. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah, I kind of just realizing that without this understanding of the middle way, there is no opportunity for enlightenment through your own efforts, because if everything is determined mechanistically from past, then we either condemn to be in perpetual cycle, or we condemn to become Buddhas naturally, just by coincidence of things. But I probably neither is really true. You have. I mean, we believe that we do have this power to take things, kind of take matters in our own hands, and make a difference. So we overcoming the karma that moves us in a cyclic, samsara. So we have a power to break that cycle, but yeah.
So how are we doing that? Is it through purification that we're doing that?
Some of that, I guess.
The purification of our wisdom obscurations. What we think is true may not be true. Even at this level, at this spiritual level, what we think is true, what we rationalize to be true spiritually, that can be a trick. That can be a trap for us.
Yeah.
Because the ego attaches to anything and everything. And that's part of the thing. The ego is part of our animal, I think our animal identity, if you will. It's part of our survival technique. Do animals have an ego? I can't say that they do. I don't know, but human beings certainly do, and that's what we have to deal with, is the human ego. And it's revealed to us, in the presence of the wheel of existence, the Mara, the demon that is holding the wheel of being a human being in his clutches. That's the ego.
Okay. Yeah. I think here they also kind of clarify that this is not you shouldn't imagine this as a wheel that rolls on the ground and goes from point A to point B. It's not that kind of the wheel that, spins to go. So that's why they say it's a wheel without the all ground. Yeah, and it has no way, it has nowhere to go. There's no purpose, but it's just the way things are. They're moving, they're
It's
moving
just
around.
a wheel is a word, that we're using to describe something that is indescribable.
Yeah, yeah. We shouldn't attach too much to the regular
The literalness
notion
of the
of,
wheel.
yeah, of a wheel of a car or cart, but just to point to something that's kind of moving around and not stopping, just moving. Like you said, there is no end to learning. Basically, it's constant evolution, no end to learning,
Yeah.
no end to.
And a number of the practices that we do and prayers that we do, but particularly the practices in the dissolution stage, it'll say something like, now practice the meditation and catch a glimpse of the mind as it is.
Hmm.
The suchness of the mind, catch a glimpse of shunyata. And the practice is leading you there to do that. And not that you're going to be able to do that the first time, second time, third time, fourth time, or whatever. It may take years of our earthly time to be able to catch that glimpse. But nevertheless, once you are able to catch that glimpse, it stays with you. It's indestructible. It's that Vajra-like quality, and that wisdom. You recognize the wisdom within yourself, that you are part of that purity. You're a part of that truth. All these things that we're trying to, create words for and so on, that we recognize that we are part of that. And then after that, then we work to try and stabilize that, to make that stronger and stabilize it in the face of all the things that happen to us in this relative world, because we remain in the relative world. Zara, welcome to where we are. We're at verse 108 right now, so we're going through pretty much verse by verse and talking about it right now, because this whole section is so important, because it answers the question of, well, what is the wheel?
So last week we talked about the 12 links of interdependent origination, and so now we've picked up from that, and now we're talking about the next part of the sequence.
Correct.
Okay.
So
And it's chapter 26.
yeah, she knows that. Yeah, so this is very, very, very profound. What is the wheel? We're getting down to, they use the term the wheel. Well, what is the wheel? So the thus gone one is answering the question. So then, anybody else have a comment about anything we've been talking about so far about this? Any disagreement or different points of view that you want to express?
I have a question about a verse a few above that.
Sure.
When it says, "This wheel is without mental elaboration because it is devoid of the sources of conceptual thinking."
Yes.
What is
What number is that?
it's in 26:105.
Okay.
What
Yes.
what is what are they referencing with when they, or what do they mean when with the sources of conceptual thinking, like the kleshas or that kind of thing, that devoid of
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that is
Everything that
comprised of conceptual thinking?
everything that's in our mind, everything that we think about, all that conceptual thinking is just confusing us and blocking us up, so we don't get the essence of what the wheel is.
So in the enlightened mind, there is not conceptual thinking. Is that right?
It can be appreciated and it can be discussed, but it's not bound by it. You see it as a tool. The way I look at it is we have language that we use to communicate with each other. And let's say, for instance, there's 100 languages in this world. And each language is going to try and describe the same everyday things that we experience, both in matter and in just thought, intellectual thought, and so on. Each language has its own way to do it. The heart has its own language. And trying or getting to that is what the experience of the wheel is. That it has a different language. So once we have an experience with that language, with the heart language, we can still engage in an ordinary conversation. But there comes a point when we say, it's just beyond that, for you to understand this, for us to understand this, we got to leave all this behind. We got to transcend this. We got to go beyond this, all the different words that we use to say that, to experience that. And that's a mind blower. It's a mind blower until you blow your mind. And then you say, oh, now I get it. And it's been there the whole time.
Yeah, it's a mind blower until you blow your mind. Is a great quote. Yeah. So it's not making the claim that any form of conceptual thinking is coming from a some kind of defilement or is coming from some kind of ego or attachment or something. That there can be conceptual thought that doesn't arise from that.
Well, no, it's all bound by that. No, conceptual thinking is of this world, of being a human being. The concepts come from human beings.
Right. Okay.
Or can I say, let's see, do I have my thing? Yeah, I'm open now. Can I say a few words on this subject since it's kind of a complex subject?
Sure, please.
Generally, there are different ways of looking at this and different turnings of the wheel. The way that I look at it and the way that it seems best to me comes from what's known as pramana, or usually translated as Buddhist psychology or Buddhist epistemology. Epistemology would be a better translation. The idea is that there are two ways of knowing things. The first is through direct experience, and the second is through conceptualization. So the analogy that's usually used is the difference between tasting sugar and conceptualizing about sugar. Tasting sugar is a direct experience, whereas conceptual talking about sugar is, tasting sugar is direct experience. Talking about it is conceptualization.
Can I just inject one thing that could also be called the conceptual thinking is vicarious experience?
Yeah, well, generally the words are in what? Let's see, can I remember right? Geez, I have a prajnapti is generally is conceptual thinking, I think. But
What?
there's
Did
another
you say
word.
prajna?
Prajnapti, and oh God, I won't even try because I'd have to check it to make sure. But there's two words, one for conceptual thinking and the other for prapancha. Prapancha is conceptual thinking, prapancha. And what the direct experience is, I cannot remember. So anyway, it's not important. Sanskrit's not important in this sense. So when we're talking about enlightenment, we're talking about the direct experience of mind, uncovered, not covered over by conceptualizations. Generally, what happens is we have all sorts of concepts who we usually are, but what we lack is the direct experience. Or we do have the direct experience, but we disregard it in favor of the conceptualization. So when we sit down to meditate, what happens is that we calm down the mind, and sooner or later we can see the mind directly without being mediated through different kinds of conceptual thoughts. And we see that our conceptual thoughts that we typically have are just not illusions, but not true to the actual experience. So it's when you talk, I don't object to anything that you say, except when you use the phrase language of the heart as a metaphor. It might be confusing because we're talking about something which is before any language, including what might be considered the language of the heart, because it is a direct experience. The
Well,
idea,
it's a metaphor, that's all.
yeah, it's a metaphor. I understand. Well, let's not be. I just hope nobody's confused by a metaphor. And because it's a, what was I going to say? Because it's a direct experience. Oh, because the mind is something which is always present to us, we can experience it directly and without not through the medium of conceptual thoughts. So it's
But the mind, it uses conceptual thoughts. The mind functions in the realm of conceptual thoughts.
But the mind also includes direct perception as well. So there's both.
Well,
So it's a combination.
that's the meaning. Well, this is an interesting conversation because to me, that's the realization of the mind comes from, or the experience of the mind comes from the heart. But then the realization, the catching up, the intellectualization of that is the intellectual mind coming and meeting. And that's where the little mind and the big mind become one.
Well, you can talk about it that way. That's fine. It's just a different kind of terminology or a different kind of.
It's just an example of that which cannot be expressed.
Yeah, because generally we think of heartfelt as being something which is not conceptualized, something which is experienced directly. But I think it's cleaner just to use the terms direct experience versus conceptualization.
And you make a good point. That's a good point. And that's why they call all this, the subtlety of the true nature. It's so subtle, and it's easily the mind is easily seduced, so that it doesn't, it can't, maintain that subtlety because of the seduction of the ego and all the things that are in the mind, that are in the intellectual mind, that kind of swamps, if you will, the functionality of the heart mind.
Yeah, the other side of it is that what role does conceptualization play? We shouldn't totally reject conceptualization because it does have its use.
Well, that's the question of why we are born, why we are human beings, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why do we have this life?
Yeah. But the point is that we are kind of hypnotized by conceptualization, and we're used by it instead of using it as a tool. Once we can stand in the correct relationship to conceptualization, then conceptualization becomes a useful tool. But generally speaking, we aren't in a good relationship with our conceptualization, and we take it to be more real than it actually is. So as I said, it's sort of being hypnotized by it, or it's sort of like being in a dream. So it's like that.
So let's get some feedback. Alex, what do you think about that?
I think that's a good. This is a good analogy or metaphor. I think that's very useful. Thank you, Bernie. That's like but I don't know if I can add anything. That was well put.
Ganga, what do you think? You have any comment?
Um, no, I guess my only comment is it's such a, even when you're having a direct experience, the conceptualization takes over so quickly. It's hard. It's kind of, it seems easy to say, oh, just have a direct experience. And just don't think about it. But your mind is so quick to want to grab onto it, because you feel like it's pleasurable, or to push it away because it's not, or to ignore it because you're bored. It seems to happen so fast. Um, I think that's I think that's the benefit of meditation, is that you sort of make yourself be still and just observe that, and hopefully that process slows down a little bit. Thank you.
No, thank you. So I mean that's the purpose of learning one-pointed mindfulness, how to develop that, but then how to go into retreat type practices, hermitages, and they speak about the masters who have lifetimes to get to their point of realization. To be able to recognize that it's not something that's done, very easily or quickly. We have a benefit of being here now to be able to talk about this and so on, and that shows our evolvement, through this and everything. But yet there's still a lot that would need to be done and so on, and we need to make the commitment to do that and so on, and it's another side of life. We're choosing a materialistic life where we have jobs, where we have families. We want all these, traps and everything, and we welcome them and we identify with them, But then the spiritualist denies all that, says, I'm not going to go down that way. I'm going to renounce the world. And I'm going to go into a cave or a hut or whatever it is for as long as it takes me to be able to have some kind of an experience of awakening, and so that I can put this life in some kind of a balance that doesn't exist for them at that time. And then going back to what Matt asked before, then you can maintain that samadhi, that state of mind. You become the embodiment of that samadhi, but that samadhi does not prevent you from being able to still be in a body and still have a conversation and still be able to use all these, conceptual words to try and help somebody to, point them to the direction that they want to go, where they're trying to go. So, Matt, what do you think about that?
I think it all makes a lot of sense. Certainly, I would imagine the kind of enlightenment experience, if we could even call it an experience, but is one that's non-conceptual. A realization of the nature of mind would, by definition, need to be non-conceptual, I think. And what the mind or consciousness of an enlightened being is like in relationship to concepts is probably a fool's errand for me to try to understand. Obviously the Buddha can use language and, to teach people and everything. What that's actually like, that experience as it relates to concepts, my little mind probably couldn't wrap around. But it's interesting to think about. I guess part of the idea that, for some reason, that jumped out at me that felt very provocative was the idea of, are all the conceptual things that make up my experience bubbling up from attachment and these defilements, all of these thoughts that come to my mind, all, even ones that, because I have all of these kind of boundaries, but like these are the type of thoughts or concepts that are kind of more defilements. These are just kind of neutral. These are, maybe more whatever, pro-social, pro whatever. But then in a sense that all of this that's coming out of my, that bubbles up for me that's conceptual is coming up from some kind of ego, defilement, attachment thing. I just found very provocative idea. That might not be what's being claimed here exactly, but that's kind of what I'm reflecting on.
No, and I think that's exactly right, and that's part of the process, is going through that conceptuality, being able to recognize our conceptual mind, being able to recognize what it is that manifests these conceptions. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to understand what it is to be a human being and have a conceptual mind that traps us.
Mm.
You know?
Yeah, and maybe a better way of looking at it, actually, now that you say that, is probably the attachment to the concepts more so than are the concepts coming from the attachments. I'm thinking particularly like with like Dzogchen practice, with what I hear people when they practice Dzogchen, where there'll still be concepts and stuff that come up, but they're like self-liberating. I know the exact language that they use, self-liberating. They're kind of cut through. They don't leave a trace. That there's something like that concepts are still present, but they're liberated, or the mind is still liberated in the presence of the concepts. Yeah.
Zara, you have any comments?
I'm not sure that I fully understand what was the question you posed originally to the group, that led to sort of the discussion. Would you rephrase like the original question you posed?
The original thing I asked was just in 26.105, like what exactly was meant by sources of conceptual, devoid of the sources of conceptual thinking.
And then the next two sentences in that verse says the wheel is undisturbed because of its infinite steadiness. So in other words, it is that samadhi, what we say is samadhi. There's that infinite steadiness, and the wheel encompasses everything because it is equal to the sky, or as vast as the sky.
Okay.
So, and the wheel itself is another conceptual word that we're using to describe something that is inexpressible.
Okay.
And I think what we're also talking about, that in some, well, I guess maybe more than like Taoist literature, there is talking about the way, the Tao, the way, somebody's on the way.
The Tao means virtue, and Te means the path, is the way of virtue. That's the way I understand the translation of Dao De Ching.
Yes,
so Ching means book.
Right, and like there is Taoist way, and this is kind of the Buddhist way, the Buddha's way, So the Buddha's way is more like a wheel.
Well, let's not get too into another topic there to the Tao, but yes, the Tao and the Buddhism run parallel with each other.
Yeah, there is not really much distinction. It's more like
it's just difference in language. It's just difference in language.
Yes, it's like more difference more in methods and point of view, rather than the essence, I think.
Yes.
So,
Lance, is this like sorry, I'm Alex.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I guess, Matt, and listening to your comments as you were asking about that and talking about like your brain grasping to certain things, in some of the studies on the karma, they talk about manas and chitta. Manas is just sort of like an information gathering system where it just picks up the senses. And then chitta is the heart mind that it says, I'm indifferent, I like this, which is later becomes the afflictive emotion of greed, or I dislike this, which later becomes the afflictive emotion of aggression or anger, the three main afflictive emotions: ignorance, greed, and aggression or anger. But first you have to have contact with the stimuli. It's called contact that forms the monoscribes, and then it forms an impression on your heart, mind, your chitta. Typically takes one or two contacts before you develop a relational framework for that, and then it becomes an afflictive emotion, and then leads into the 8 worldly concerns. Because I was listening to you talk through, and I'm wondering, because I think thoughts are a sixth sense, right? You have your main 5 sense organs, and then thoughts are so amok that I think they are in and of themselves a sixth category. And as Bernie said, the meditation, you become aware of it as a sixth sense, and how amok and how the wild horses up there are out of control. So just like if you had a sensory issue with the nose and you're out of control with smelling certain fragrances, right? It's so palpable to you because you can see the candle burning and smell it, but you cannot see this unless you sit in meditation and see all the wild horses going. So I don't know really if that is answering a question that Lance, you're posing to the group, or helpful, but that's how I'm experiencing it right now in going through the 3-year program, and really breaking apart those concepts and understanding some of the academic and intellectual terms.
Well, good. Well, just to put a point on what you're saying, so what you were talking about, that sixth sense, is the mental consciousness that is processing all the input that comes from your eyesight consciousness, from your nose consciousness, from your tongue consciousness, and so on, and all those mental, the washing machine, all these things going back and forth and everything, washing away in your brain. That's the sixth consciousness.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I mean, because those are the body conscious, the things that make up our body. And so,
And
yeah.
then the seventh consciousness is the karmic consciousness, the I am, your identity, the I, me, mine.
Okay,
And
I
then
hadn't
the
heard
eighth
that.
consciousness is called the alaya consciousness, or the storehouse consciousness, where all these imprints remain
Okay.
until you're able to cut through that.
Is that delayed karma, Lance? So like seed karma that continues with you regardless of the body you're in?
Until you are able to put it down.
Got it. I had not heard it described that way, but that makes sense, like the storehouse consciousness. That makes complete sense. That also explains why, like, you look at certain babies when they're born, why even you can see personality differences, right? Like certain reactions, because that's in their consciousness. Like that's part of what they're going for, like aversion, right? Like some things, some babies aren't, and then the other ones are without any
Yeah,
learning.
we would say that's their karma. They're bringing that karma connection with them. Maybe it's a genetic karma. Maybe it's a spiritual karma. That's a whole other discussion, but something from a legacy, if you will. Okay. So let's move on. So we're on 109, verse 109. It is a wheel of the effortless and ceaseless activity of the thus gone one. We're talking about the wheel again. It is the wheel of the effortless and ceaseless activity of the thus gone one. It is a wheel beyond activity and non-activity. It is a wheel utterly ungraspable. It is a wheel beyond effort and effortlessness, an inexpressible wheel. It is a wheel that is like the nature of phenomena. It is a wheel of entering the sameness of all phenomena within a single sphere. So all
That
the
last one is very abstract. I don't know if anybody has any insight.
Well, it's when the wheel becomes a sphere. You know, we say the 10 directions. The 10 directions is really pointing out to us a spherical kind of an object, you know, and our so this manifestation, if you will, becomes that wheel becomes kind of spherical because it touches all points. It doesn't need to touch all points. It's like space. It's samadhi. It's the king of samadhi. It's the completely open, what we say, the open mind, but it's the open heart mind. And the intellectual mind is quiet. It's not interfering with the heart mind.
All right, so this is just a little bit more further expanding it into kind of this all-encompassing thing as opposed to just thinking of a flat wheel turning somewhere.
Right.
Yeah, it's like, it's multidimensional.
Yes.
Infinite dimensional. It's
Yeah,
infinite
and
dimensional.
that's a good way of saying it because it's not relative to only 3 dimensions. You know, this is invoking, you know, all dimensions that are beyond our capability of recognition. So then 110, verse 110 says, it is a wheel that never reverses and continuously bestows guidance and blessings on sentient beings that are deprived of freedom. And we've talked about this freedom concept many times, that are deprived of freedom. It is the wheel that never reverses, continuously bestows guidance and blessings on sentient beings that are deprived of freedom. It is a wheel of entering the way of the ultimate truth, which assumes non-duality. It is a wheel that genuinely subsumes the realm of phenomena. This wheel is immeasurable because it transcends all limits. So this goes back to, you know, it blows your mind. You know, whatever you think it is, you know, our mind is a conceptual organ. It conceptualizes everything. And when it has to deal with just plain freedom, it just blows everything away. And when you're really at that point of crossing over that point, you know, there's you know, we're preparing ourselves not to fear losing our mind, losing our relative mind. Because we approach that, and oh my God, my heart starts beating and everything. You start sweating, and all these kind of things start happening. You gotta say, oh well, this is the body reacting. This is the ego reacting. The ego is about to die. I'm about to lose my mind. So you have to approach it with great compassion, with great wisdom, with great joy and great equanimity. You know, all these teachings are leading us to that, are showing us how to do that. This is the beauty. This is why Lance follows Buddhist practice, because I don't know another way to be able to do this. This is the way that Siddhartha Gautama did it. So then the next one is verse 111. It says, the wheel cannot be enumerated because it is beyond something that can be counted. The wheel is inconceivable because it is beyond the realm of conceptual mind. This wheel is unequaled because it is beyond equality. This wheel is inexpressible because it is beyond all paths of audible words. So this is the kind of thing here we're reading about it, and maybe we're being inspired by it because we haven't come close to any of this realization, but now we're kind of maybe being motivated, turned on by it and everything. But also, we may be people who have experienced this and have suppressed it for any one of a number of reasons. And something rings true with you, something vibrates, and there's a remembrance, at least of something, awakening in ourselves and saying, oh yeah, this means something to me. This is something I can grasp, if only for a moment, to know that it is a stepping stone to get to where I really want to be, to what it is to be a complete human being. So, I've used the analogy before that we've been born many times and we've died many times. Where is it that we go when we die? And where is it that we are before we're born? Are they the same place, figuratively? And the remembrance is having the quietude of our intellectual mind to allow the heart wisdom to be able to come up and to be able to recognize that vibration, to recognize that freedom. Because when we die, we're free of our body. We're free of our little mind. We're free spiritual beings, if you will. And before we're born, we're entering back from that freedom because we can't maintain that freedom. And we're coming back into a formed body because the ego is undeniable for us at that point. And we need to come back to be able to have another turn at being able to liberate ourselves.
So profound when you think about that, just what you just said. Yeah.
And that makes so much sense when you think about your life and to think about who we are, these 6 people that are here, because we're all really good people. We've had to work very hard to get to where we are, to be able to have this kind of a conversation and understand, a good degree of what it is that's being expressed here, what's being said, And we accept the fact that we're not perfect and we're working through something and we're seeing what the process is. So then the next verse, 112, is, it is limitless. It is without example because it is beyond exemplification. It is like the sky. It does not cease, yet neither is it permanent. Accepting interdependence does not disturb its peace. It is infinitely peaceful. It is reality itself. It is nature. Its nature is none other than that, not like that or neither. I'll repeat those couple lines. It is limitless. It is without example because it is beyond exemplification. It is like the sky. It does not cease, yet neither is it permanent. Accepting interdependence does not disturb its peace. Accepting interdependence does not disturb its peace. It is infinitely peaceful. It is reality itself. its nature is none other than that, not like that or neither. That verse all by itself is a mind-blowing meditation. So then the next verse, 113, it speaks the languages of all beings. It suppresses all demonic forces and defeats the extremists. It is an example from cyclic existence. It is the entering into the realm of the Buddhas. It is understood by noble beings and realized by solitary Buddhas. The Bodhisattvas embrace it. It is praised by all the Buddhas. It is indivisible from all the thus gone ones. So where do we fit into those realms of existence? And then the last verse of this section, 114, says Maitreya, the future Buddha, the Buddha to come, who is within us. Who is the future Buddha? We are Maitreya. Each one of us is a future Buddha. Maybe the future will be tomorrow, maybe next week, maybe next year, whenever. Maybe lifetimes, we talk about lifetimes. Maitreya, such is the wheel of Dharma that the thus gone one turns. It is when the thus gone one turns this wheel that he is called a thus gone one. He's thus gone. He's gone from phenomenal existence, being bound by phenomenal existence. He may be in phenomenal existence. He may be taking a human form or some other form, but he's not bound by it. That's the difference. He or she. It's non-sex. Then he is called a perfectly awakened Buddha, the one who naturally manifests, Lord of Dharma, the guide, the perfect guide, the complete guide, the captain, the one with mastery over all dharmas, and the Lord of the Dharma. So all the epithets that we refer to the thus gone one, to the Buddha. So, there's many different ways to express this. I mean, it says, just before it speaks the languages of all beings. So, there's scholars who have a very, finite vocabulary, that speaks, one word can mean, 2 pages of what, I'm saying, what we're saying. My way of approaching this is as an ordinary human being who's not really well educated in that. But meanwhile, I can still find words to try and paint a picture. And then somebody will come along and say, oh, I know what you mean. I explain it this way. And to me, that's all perfectly valid. And I enjoy that. That's why I think we're all together here to have that kind of a conversation and discussion, that we can see it, from different points of view and different vocabularies. And I think it's great. But the point is, the essence remains the same. And that's what we're trying to get to, is the essence. To trying to get to our own personal experience. which is a transpersonal experience, because with that comes now you understand each other because you see yourself in everyone else and everyone else can see you. You become naked. That's why in some of the iconography of the tantric Buddhism and everything, that the primordial Buddha, Samantabhadra, is naked. He represents that um, that essence of wisdom, if you will. So how does this make you feel? What do you think? Bernie, what do you think?
Of this one that you just read?
Well, what the topic has been tonight, what we've been talking about, the wheel and,
Yeah, what this really is talking about the nature of the Buddha and the nature of ultimate reality, and as such, it's kind of a difficult subject to grasp, and it's using a lot of traditional terminology to do so. And it's referring to the wheel of Dharma, but it's really talking about the nature of ultimate nature of reality, or the Dharma Dhatu, and it's talking about the Buddha. And that's the general thrust of the whole thing. And we can go into what that nature is, which is all through this text. And now,
yeah, so all those words that you just mentioned, those were words that came later.
yeah, well, later than you mean historically than the
Historically, I mean, because it
Buddha's
wasn't
first sermon. Of course, they came later. They're sort of a later development, but or later teaching at least. So, there's not much to say to talk about here, except to talk about why each of these terms that they're talking about either refers to the Buddha or refers to the ultimate nature of reality. For instance, it says it's limitless, is beyond exemplification, is like the sky, it does not cease. It neither is it it does not see, neither is it permanent. We can go into all these, and talk about each of them at length, but presumably most of the people here are already familiar with all this stuff, so it's not a great deal of point to go into it, and I'm not sure I could do it justice in any case. So, but that's basically what's been going on here and all that we've been talking tonight.
Thank you. Alex, you have a comment?
No, I mean it's good to have it sort of like described from different directions, from different although there is no direction, there is no thing that we're trying to describe, but it's like when you have enough fingers that point somewhere, you finally may have actually idea where you yourself gotta be looking, to find the moon. The moon is very far, but well, it helps if there is kind of like a few fingers pointing here and there, then you may actually find where that moon on that sky. But eventually, like we have to do our own job to point our vision and find the moon on the sky. because all the fingers are on the ground. So yeah, but I think the moon is there. So it's just a little bit of effort to find it, but I think this is all helpful to read this.
Very good, thank you. Kongo, would you like to comment?
It just reminds me of the difference between, um, how Zen like portrays this idea of emptiness and this experience, and how some of the Mahayana texts, especially the ones that are used in Tibetan teachings, it's like one from one point of view, from the Zen point of view, they just try and talk about that direct experience with a really simple example. Like maybe the teacher hits the student with a stick. Does something simple. And then with some of these writings, it's like, well, we're just gonna throw 1,000 words at it and get to the same, you know, one is like it's so beyond meaning you can't even say anything about it, and the others is so beyond meaning you say everything about it. I think that just strikes me, that contrast, when I read these sutras that have so much description of something that can't be described, right? Yeah, thank you.
Do you think it validates the person who is trying to process all this? It validates the process of trying to accumulate, the understanding of this?
I think it's supposed to overwhelm your ability to try and conceptualize it, because there's so many examples, you can't even keep them all in your head, and there's some of the imagery is you can't create. Especially when they talk about like huge numbers or mini Buddhas, or just how do you visualize something that's what's an example? And it just says itself. It says it's inexpressible because it's beyond all path of audible words. So I mean, it has many things like that.
Well, does that in subsequent times? I mean, this was uttered, 2,600 years ago. It was written down 2,000 years ago, and so on. But then there became these threads, that came out of this, these lineage lines that came out of this. That here's a master who says, "Well, here's how I practice this," and then thousands of people follow his teachings, and then another thread goes out, and here's how I did this, and here's how I did this, another one does that, and so on. And they're all, they may be more concise in some ways, but here we're looking at from the Genesis point of view, from well, here is where it all comes from. And to me, that has value, but to have those individual lines, those lineage lines, are very helpful too, because that's where you take the practice and you sit down and you cut right through it. I remember years ago, a teacher, we were in a big group situation, a retreat, a 10-day retreat or something like that. And he says, your teacher is the most important person, more important than the Buddha. Because the Buddha, you got all these words and everything, like you just said, but it's your teacher that you're making the connection with. And it's important to recognize your teacher as being the emanation of the Buddha teachings and so on. To see that it's coming through that particular lineage and having a lineage and so on. So whether the lineage is broad, like it's Kagyu or it's Zen or something like that, they're all valid. It's all good. And maybe you change, you say, oh, I've been doing this one for so many years, but I'd like to try this one for whatever reason, and I do that, and maybe it helps you, maybe it confuses you, and you go back to the first one. But I'm just making the point that here is the genesis of it, but then there are these threads that go out, these emanations that go out that have great value to us. Matt, what would you say? You have any comment?
I don't think I have anything else to add. But it's a great discussion, though.
Okay, thank you. Zara?
No, I just want to thank everyone for making comments this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, this next recitation, of course, we're not going to do it now, but this next recitation is several pages, and I think through the end of this, the topics get a little bit broader. But very important. So we'll continue. But the meat of the turning of the wheel of Dharma is what we've been involved with these past 4 or 5 weeks. That's why we've been going so slow, and not to take these for granted, and to recognize that these are scripture, this is book that we will come back to over and over again through our career and refresh, our memories, our study, and so on like that. It's not something to be read and thought about one time. It's, we have to live with it for a while and then get back to it. And things that seemed unimaginable to us or dense or whatever, then, through the process of living, we begin to recognize more things. We begin to have more experience, and these things mean more to us, and so on. So we have the benefit of these things. It's great. It's priceless. The amount of work that has gone into translating these and making these available, putting these up on the website from these very, brilliant people who have done this virtually, on their own. They haven't been paid for this. They've all been volunteers, and they're all, very erudite scholars and monastics and so on who have done this. So this has been a great labor of love for them. So we are, the recipients of that, and it's a wonderful thing.
Lance, I wondered how many people that are practicing our lineage have actually read, or just any of the lineages have read these sutras, like lay people take the time to go through.
I'd say very few. Bernie might have more experience with it, but, very, very few.
So people who come to Buddhism by way of, let's say, oh, I heard about meditation, right? Like buzzwords, may have never or ever even understand where this is coming from.
Correct.
Okay.
Even the monastics, they may read these, but how much they study them is a question of the monastery that they go to and the levels that they go to within the monastery. Because just like we can be specialized in ophthalmology or something like that, we're a doctor, we got to go through all the basics, but then we specialize in something, and some are sutric scholars and some are tantric scholars, and so on.
That makes sense. That's really helpful. I was listening to Dr. Lee at the Urban Dharma in Asheville. He made an interesting point about meditation was like this thing that people didn't really understand within the Buddhist philosophy, because it became something that you could sell and get certified, you could make money off of.
Oh yeah.
And that it was like, let's just take this one thing from the Buddhist philosophy because we can market it, sell it, and TM it, and then totally bypass all the actual real meat of it.
No question about that. They're doing a good service, in some ways, but it's a good point. There's a book called
But
Gurus for Sale. Alex, you were going to say something?
well, I was just wondering if you are aware of any particular tradition or school of Buddhism that has this as part of standard curriculum, or is it something that's not been available widely?
Well, from what I understand, talking with the Tibetans and so on, that when an 8-year-old kid, goes into the monastery for whatever reasons, there's several reasons that they might go into the monastery, but as young kids, this is one of the first things that they begin to learn are sutras. They read them, how much they can understand them, but they're being introduced to them.
Mhm.
And so how they take it up later on when they're teenagers or after they go into retreat and then they come out of retreat and then they go into the higher levels, the PhD levels of being a monastic or something, do they come back and say, okay, now I'm going to go back to the sutras, I'm really going to dive in and try and understand them. So that's the progression. So to answer your question, I think they're all exposed to it, by some degree, whether it's just reading it and not paying any attention, or it's having a higher interest in it because of the teachers or the students themselves. But everybody's introduced to it.
So the Lalitavistara is part of like standard collection of sutras that monasteries adopt.
I think so, and there's certain monasteries go to certain sutras that they favor those. I think that's the way it does work. Just like they have certain monasteries have their own prayers and they have their own melodies and so on.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And I'm glad that we're sharing this and talking about this and taking it to heart. And, always, if you have the opportunity to, schedule yourself into a retreat, with the lamas and everything, the Dharma centers, it will be groundbreaking for you. It's a real step in the direction of where you want to go with this anyway. So that'll make a huge difference, and all this will start to make more sense. Okay. So we'll recite the Lord Jigten Simgun's dedication prayer on page 36 and 37. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, yogins, yoginis, and dakinis, dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the 3 times, by myself and all sentient beings, in samsara and nirvana, and the innate word of virtue, not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Sravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Mars, and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings with my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om, Ah, Hung. Om, Ah, Hung. Om, Ah, Hung. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you.